all my screens. All right, so Sally, we have a quorum, and what is our total vote for our counts moving forward?
We do. Let's see. $13.
Okay, awesome. Whew. Thank you so much. All right, with that, we'll just a couple real quick housekeeping issues for anybody that's not attended before. We agreed last time, George, right, that we would not be quite as formal going through the process and allow you guys to move through it by talking. I still have to go to the public a couple times to make sure that they have input, but we're not going to, we're going to try again to just have the conversation and not go into questions and then public and then you guys and the public. And so we will hear the proposal, go to the public, see if anybody has anything to say about it, and then you guys can cuss and discuss. If something comes up that I think the public needs to have the chance to rebut, we'll go back to them. But other than that, we'll keep it as informal as we can. No, that's not really how we're doing most of them. It looks like Tony has a hand up.
Hey, Shauna, I was going to ask, the agenda posted on the city's website does not have active links that show you the individual proposals listed.
Oh, really?
Anybody else on the committee is having that issue?
Yeah, I noticed that also.
I've never used the links on there. I didn't even know they existed till today.
Yeah, I think this is the first one where they don't work. I
was going to say in the past they always did. Yeah.
It worked for me yesterday. So
yeah,
so I pulled them all down earlier in the week and got them.
I just go to your guys' website and go to your 22 fire one and say review proposed amendments, and then go down to the fire code, and I just keep them all right there. But I didn't know that those links worked until today. I accidentally drug my mouse across it and found that they worked. So maybe, I don't know if you need them today. Like if you want, I would go to this website. Can you see the website?
Yeah, I've done what you've said, but I wonder for the public, the links are more convenient, definitely. Right, and accessible.
For sure. I know when I'm in my PDF, I can't get them to work, but when I converted my PDF to a Word, they worked. That was really on my agenda. Because like right now, if I drag my mouse over it, what did I do? Close it out. Jeez Louise. About as bright as a box of rocks. If I'm on this agenda and I drag over it, it does nothing. But in my Word version, they work. So it's pretty easy to save this as a Word document. Oops, I swear. I have a cold and I'm just not feeling that great. So if you just say save as and change this line to Word, a Word document, it'll save it as Word, and then the links might work. That's how I had to do it. All right, let me pull these back up here so that I have them. And this, okay. All right, let's get started with this agenda. Is everybody ready to go? Everybody's good? In my way. I swear. I had the agenda up here. Here we go. All right. All right, so the first item, so hopefully everybody understands that process, and we're going to try to be informal, but we need to keep it moving because we do have a lot of proposals to get through. So if for some reason we see too much conversation taking place, we'll have to go back to the formal way of doing it, which does take more time, I think. 46, item A, number 46 on our agenda is one that we tabled last time. And I don't know if it is on your agenda. It just got added to the agenda recently, like yesterday or the day before or something. So hopefully you guys have it. It's one that we heard last week or the last meeting, and then we tabled it today because some people worked on it on the side. They created a proposal, brought it back, and that's what we're going to look at now. So I'm going to pull up number 46. And so that you can see, I hope that this is the modified version. Oh, this little taskbar is driving me crazy. Okay. Wonder if I can move it to the screen. All right, so this is item number 46 that, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the revised version that you guys just submitted yesterday or the day before?
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay, then
It does
I'm
look
going-
like it.
All right, then I'm going to ask John or whoever wants to present to kind of give us a rundown of why we ended up changing it and what you did.
I would say Robert Merlino, since he rewrote it, is our best option.
Okay. Whoever.
Yeah, it kind of went a lot different direction than where we started with it, but we simplified the original Denver amendment to specify that this is both for location and how it is accessed, and then provided the exceptions in a more formalized format, clarified several things with the exceptions, including where specifically you would measure travel distance, how that travel distance is measured, and the requirements for rating of the corridors and stairways for that travel distance. Then we kind of took it a little bit further to clarify more fire pump location situations that are not currently being clarified whatsoever. So the stuff within exception 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 is kind of the meat of the original Denver amendment. The new exception 2 would deal with when you have a fire pump required in a very tall building up above grade level, and just clarifying that you are allowed to have that in a building, and the location needs to be approved by the fire department. Number 3 is talking about existing buildings, when a new fire pump is being added or an existing fire pump is being replaced by a fire pump of a differing nominal rating. And again, that location would need to be approved and pre-planned with the fire department. And number 4 exception just clarifies that replacing an existing fire pump like for like does not require changes to existing fire pump room or location.
I'm trying to remember the original, because this was all about the door at the bottom of the stair and how far it could be, but it's grown. Am I right? And that's it's grown. All right.
Yeah, discussion came up, Shauna, with the comment about in new buildings, and the discussion came up previously about, wait, should this really be applying to new buildings or to all buildings? And I think that's what motivated the last 3 new exceptions that weren't in the original.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Glenn. For the record, Glenn is our subject matter expert for the fire code hearings. So if you have questions or concerns or something, we will ask Glenn. Robert, can you just identify yourself, who you're representing?
Yep, so Robert Merlino, I work for Western States Fire Protection. I'm representing Western States Fire Protection and the Colorado Fire Protection Association. I'm on the board of the Colorado Fire Protection Association.
Perfect, thank you.
One other thing to clarify, that we were, in our discussions of revising this, it came up that currently there's only a handful of high-rise buildings in Denver that have fire pumps above grade level. But when those situations arise, an admin mod would be needed. So this would eliminate the need for doing an admin mod, which I feel is kind of unnecessary red tape to have to do an admin mod for that situation.
Excellent. And can you remind us who all was the working group for this proposal?
Myself, Tony, John Wojcicki, and Glenn helped out as well.
Perfect.
And just a quick note to the committee, I want to welcome you guys to let me assist you. You know, you guys have a pretty heavy job. If you need me to bring up some other documents or research documents to answer questions you have for proponents, that's what I can definitely be very helpful with.
Mhm. Perfect. Thanks, Glenn. All right, I'm going to take this and give it to the public to see if there's any public input on this item. Just as a reminder, we brought this up, we discussed it, put a working group together to refine it, and this is what they're coming back with. So is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this item, for or against? I mean, if we're going to be informal, I'd like to get it. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this item? Have questions on this item? All right, seeing none. Committee, what thoughts, discussions, motions, questions? Brad?
So, yeah, I just had a question. Why are we measuring to the most remote portion of the fire pump room versus the door to the fire pump room?
A couple of reasons on that, Brad, and there are a couple of concerns specific to that. Measuring to the door, we did not want to do that because it puts the possibility that you could put a door in some odd location in a corridor to meet that measurement. And it creates kind of a loophole to some regards. Our next kind of go around was measuring to the fire pump and or controller itself, which wasn't ideal either, in my opinion, because it kind of puts a location for a fire pump and a controller set by the architect at the beginning of a project when that might not be ideal or practical. So we revised it to most remote portion of the fire pump room because that's more consistent with how travel distance is measured throughout building code. The distance actually, I believe the original amendment was 25 feet. We grew it to 50. And when we put in the language measuring the most remote portion, Tony increased that to 60 feet.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
I do have the same question as Brad, and I have one more.
Okay, Michael?
So a typical fire pump room, kind of like my rule of thumb, and it's kind of generous, is 20 by 20. So if it's 20 feet already to the room, we're left with 40 feet. And I don't think 40 feet, I mean, is not a whole lot of room to go.
You had 25 feet before, so you're.
Yeah, but it was never really enforced, or the previous section version was not very well written. So, I mean, when we were going below grade, we were exceeding the 25 feet. And the way that it was interpreted, it was 25 feet after you exit the stair. So I just want to mention that if we have already a fire pump room that is 20 by 20, and we have 40 feet to play with, it is almost a mute. I mean, we're not going to have any fire pumps below grade. So that's number one that I have. And then number two, I don't understand. So if I have an existing building and I need to replace the fire pump, am I supposed to be getting an approval to replace the fire pump? I mean, I understand we get to pull a permit and submit drawings, but do we need to revisit the location of the fire pump?
Let me answer your second question in my mind. The first question I'll let Tony answer because he was the one that kind of was driving the distance requirement on that. But as far as the second question, if you are replacing a fire pump in a building like for like, as this reads, you have to do nothing with the fire pump room. If you are say upgrading a building, putting in a bigger standpipe or a bigger fire pump for some reason, then you are subject to looking at new requirements for the fire pump room.
Well, I'm reading it. It says in existing buildings where a new fire pump is being added, right? Or an existing fire pump is being replaced with a new of different nominal rating. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. I mean, there is horsepower, GPM. The location and access shall be pre-planned and approved. So somehow now it needs to be pre-planned and approved.
Yeah, so in my mind, you have a pump that's 60 years old that was designed to a different standard in a fire pump room of who knows what standard. That building is undergoing a upgrade for some reason, and you're bringing it to a current standard and bringing the fire pump up to current standards as well. So in that case, it would trigger you looking into providing a fire pump room that is of proper code standards as well.
Well, I don't want to prolong the conversation, but if I have a 1972 building that gave 65 pounds on the roof and it's only 500 GPM, and I need to replace it, are you telling me I need to go to 100 pounds connected to emergency power? I mean, that's kind of like an impossible thing to do on some of the existing buildings.
This is only talking about access and location of the fire pump room, nothing else that goes along with it. So I'd agree it could get you into a lot of different scenarios there. But the general idea is if you have an existing building which is undergoing a significant fire protection retrofit or a remodel where you'd be required to put in a larger fire pump, if that's the case, you would need to bring the fire pump room and access to the fire pump room up to current standards as well.
And I do agree if there's a significant remodel or a change in use of an existing building.
But
I'm going to let other people comment.
I'm just say it says, and the location and access shall be pre-planned and approved. That doesn't mean you might have to change anything. You might be able to use existing if you pre-plan it and you get it approved, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different situations that could arise in existing buildings, and the word pre-planned simply matches what's in NFPA 20, and NFPA 20 says pre-planned. So it leaves in the weird cases like that, it leaves it open to the fire department to kind of figure out what makes most sense.
All right, who's next? Brad, you have more questions?
Yeah, just I was just looking at the 1.3 under exceptions. And it requires a fire resistance rating to match interior exit stairway enclosure rating requirements for the building. So does that mean if I have a 2-story building, my pathway does not need to be rated at all, correct?
So Brad, that would usually 4 stories or less, right? A shaft of 4 stories or less would be 1 hour rated.
You can interconnect 2 stories without an enclosure.
Yeah, but I think your stairway enclosures would always be subject to the 1 hour, correct? Especially if they're exit stairways.
Not unless you're exceeding travel distance or something on a floor. I don't think so. But I mean, is that the intent? I mean, it kind of makes sense, actually. When you've got a 2-story building, do you really need a rated path to the fire pump? I don't know.
For a low rise, it's 1 hour, right? For a fire pump.
Yeah, and I think that's how we were specific to say enclosure.
Okay, so no enclosure is required. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe Glenn, you can help us on the section that would drive the 1 hour requirement. For
Yeah, so
enclosure less than 4 stories.
well, I think what Brad is bringing up is what we had brought up when we were discussing this is 2015 IBC brought in the concept of exit access stairways. So those were interior stairways that are not part of the exit portion. So they aren't protected yet. They're part of the exit access portion, just like your corridor. And so that's why I had suggested that first language to say a corridor or an exit passageway, to put a nod to both. If you're in a corridor, you're in the exit access. And that may have you leading, again, you may be leading then to an exit access stairway where you connect 2 levels without a rating. Whereas an exit passageway, you've now entered the protected exit area. And if you reach a stairway at the end of that, it will be an exit stairway at that point. That's when the language was suggested to just state a minimum 1 hour, regardless of whether it was a corridor exit access or passageway exit. But then, so I think it still works that it's saying to match the interior exit stairway. So if you don't have an interior exit stairway and it's an exit access stairway, then you have no rating to match. So you have no rating. So that's kind of a way that it still would work.
Or
Okay,
Glenn, could you read it that this would apply to all exit stairway enclosures in the building, not just the enclosure taking you to the pump room?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a little trickiness. That's what Brad brings up, is if you have a shaft that's connecting 4 or more stories, you're going to be up to your 2-hour shaft rating there. But who's to say that's the same shaft serving this stairway? I mean, you guys are more familiar with the designs you're seeing in Denver, but you're certainly connecting this particular stairway to all the other stairways in the building, regardless of how they are connected or if they even interface together.
Yeah, and I think that was our intent when we wrote it, Brad, was if you're 4 stories or less, you're going to be 1 hour. If you're greater than that, then you're 2 hour. And I think that was our intent, when maybe it doesn't necessarily read that way.
I mean, it might be simpler just to state it that way by number of stories. And you're in the intent, and I'm assuming the intent is not, the way it reads, travel path from the exterior to the fire pump room shall be through a corridor with a minimum fire resistance rating to match interior exit stairway enclosure rating requirements for the building. I know it says corridor or exit passageway, but I could see where somebody would misinterpret and say, you know, the qualifier with the descriptor, which is with a minimum fire resistance rating to match ... could be applied to both corridor and exit passageway. Corridor by definition has certain rating requirements that don't necessarily match the interior exit stairway enclosure requirements. So I don't know, just
Is there
I was just trying to get handle what your intent is.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the reason of tying the hourly rating for the access to the fire pump to the hourly rating of your exit system. Because I mean, you're getting 4 more stories in your shaft. You're increasing your egress coming down that from your occupants in the building and your time delay with that. So we increase the protection. I'm not sure how that correlates to your access, but
Also to note, NFPA 20 is going to be requiring that the access to the fire pump room provide the same rating as the fire pump room, which will be a minimum of 1 hour in any case.
Is there ever a case where it has to be 2 hour?
In non-sprinkler buildings.
Yeah, I like that. That seems to make, that's easier to interpret, easier to apply, and kind of makes sense to me. But
Brad, if you're good with that, Tony, I was going to ask you about the 60 foot. I think anytime we have a metric, you know, what you're trying to do is avoid administrative modifications, trying to avoid the situation that Michael brought up, where you just don't have enough feet. I appreciate moving just so the one dimension. That's actually great. Now we're not dealing with stairs and doors and which door and all the other elements. But when you deal with the diagonal of a potential room and you deal with the length of the stairwell going below grade for whatever that grade may be, is 60 enough to capture most of what you need to keep people out of administrative mods?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wish we had Michael designing more pump rooms because I haven't seen a 20 by 20 yet. How about you, Robert?
Yeah.
It's
actually,
funny
we're-
that you say that, Tony, because I get the same comment all the time. I start with 20 by, they say, what is the size of the fire pump room? I say, with complaining or without? I said,
So,
Yeah.
so
Right.
my point is pick a number that you have administrative mods. And that's,
Yeah, I think we more commonly see 12 by 12, 15 by 15 max.
okay.
And Robert, I know you've seen a lot of these rooms. You could probably attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, they try and make them as small as humanly possible, and there's usually water equipment stuck in there too. So I don't know. Coming up with a footage on that, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I
Michael
think-
made,
I-
you made
I
A good
think
point.
getting to the door is a more equitable, you know,
yeah, the
once
problem
you're
we have with-
inside the door, I don't know why it matters.
Yeah,
if
the
fire
problem we have
pump
with the
room
door
is-
mic is sometimes they'll move it and then inside the room, they create a narrow hallway that
Mhm.
eventually gets you to the pump room just to meet the
Oh.
distance requirement to the door. And I don't think that's our intent, right? Our intent is to keep the pump room on the perimeter of the building where the firefighters that are tending to it are protected should there be any kind of collapse.
Well, we're kind of penalizing a 20 by 20 room versus a 10 by 10 room.
All right, so it sounds like there's a little bit of question about the 60 feet, and it sounds like maybe 1.3 might need to be modified a little bit to match NFPA 20. Is there any other issues that you guys are seeing in here that we need to talk about before I send this to the public? Because I know there's a comment in there. Everybody okay with number 2, number 3, number 4? All right, I'm gonna ask the public, maybe it seems like John might have a comment. You don't have your hand up, John, but I saw something in the chat. So do you want to discuss anything on this issue, John? Wojciech. Sorry, I didn't have you allowed to talk. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, I was just noticing or noting that a 2-story building would be a 3-story building if we've got a subgrade fire pump. And the original intent of that section was not to say that this building, however you've configured the you're using exit access stairs or whatever, that's the fire protection rating that we're looking for, fire resistant rating that we're looking for. It was, what would this building require for its interior exit stairways? And there's a difference between the IBC requirements, which referenced the interior access stairs, and the NFPA 20 requirements, which referenced the fire pump room. And the concept was originally to try to match the egress capabilities so that the firefighters who were in the fire pump room had an equal opportunity to exit the fire pump room as anyone else in the building. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to be heard on this before we close it out? Anybody else? No, all right. Committee. You want to try to modify something that you have here? That would be a motion to further modify, because this is a modification. Or What you thinking?
If you really wanted to simplify this, you'd get rid of 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and just have exception 1 that said fire pump rooms may be located 1 level below grade where approved by the fire code official, and leave it at that.
Yeah, Robert, that's too. I think we need more detail to guide designers.
I'll definitely make that comment. The whole point of the amendments is to,
Otherwise, we'd be debating every project built in the city.
agree.
Yeah, when we design a building, I mean, we need to know ahead of time. We cannot figure it out unless you put an admin mode. There's no other methods to.
Yeah, I
get
think
approval.
this is a topic that needs a lot of detail because it's being done by architects, which aren't typically familiar with the mechanical components and the requirements of the hydraulics for the system. So we have to give them as much detail as we can.
Okay.
All right,
So
then can we go through it line by line and tell us what you want to change? Because I haven't heard any discussion about the top. So basically it's just going to say that the fire pumps shall be located at grade level and accessible from the outside unless approved. Then exception. So I heard some talk about the 60-foot. Do we need to change this maximum travel distance from the exterior access at grade level to the most remote portion? Shall not exceed 60 feet. Is the 60 feet the question? Or is it from the remote portion the question?
I think the most remote portion is the best way to measure it. So then in that case, what number of feet makes most sense?
And my only question is, I just want to keep it out of the admin mod world. So if 60 feet is good, I'm good.
I mean, if it's from the design point of view, I think 80 feet will.
Yeah, Michael brings up a good
penalize it.
point. I mean, you could be looking at a situation where the architect's going to stuff a very tiny room at the end of 60 feet. And I think it would be better if somehow we could get a larger room closer to the exterior of the building.
And they will do that.
Yeah, so kind of how we conceptualized the 60 feet was 20 feet to get from the discharge doors to the basement, and then 25 feet travel in the basement and 15-foot travel in the room. Hence the 60 feet.
And to clarify, is that measured horizontally, or are we talking about vertical rise here at all?
Yeah, both, because you'd be going down the stairs from the discharge doors.
I just looked at a project that we have in design right now, Tony, and our room it's about 300 square feet and we're at 58 feet horizontally. So by the time we get our rise in there, we wouldn't meet the letter of the code here.
So is 80 a good number? 75?
Why not just make it 100?
Yeah, the problem again, though, is we're trying to keep the firefighters close to an exit path and close to the perimeter of the building, right? So as we make this larger, we're moving further away from the intent.
Mm-hmm. What's a good travel distance? So 75 feet, that seems common.
Brian, how much was it at your project if you include the vertical?
I don't remember what the floor to floor is. Michael, I'd have to go look that up, but it's a garage. So what is that going to be? 12 feet or something like that, maybe?
15, maybe.
Yeah.
How about if we go 75 feet? Would that cover everyone's concerns?
Honestly, that was the number that I was going to talk about earlier, Tony, and as long as it meets the intent, and I think it gives everybody the room that they need. Even in a 300 square foot room, the diagonal is pretty long. So Brian and Mike, you have the most experience, and Robert, you three have the most experience with that. Does that capture most of your project?
It captures the one I just happened to look at. It's literally sitting on my desk in review. So,
I mean, a question for Tony is the point of this to kind of force people into having them at grade, or give them a realistic opportunity to utilize this?
Yeah, no, I think the safety of our firefighters is pinnacle. And then meeting the intent again, you know, if we have collapse, we want to keep them on the perimeter of buildings as much as we can.
Okay, 75 feet going once.
Steve, you had a comment?
I did.
Oh, Steven, yeah, okay.
I was going to say the 75 foot, I think, is a good number. What we have to remember is those on this committee, as well as Tony, we're going to be asked how we arrived at X.
Mhm.
And I think 75 foot is a good number to say 25 foot from the exterior of the building to a stair, 25 foot of vertical travel, 25 foot to the back. So it has some logic to it. 60 to me, it just seemed to be floating out there. And none, I won't remember this when asked by the architect, why is it 60 feet? Why is it 75 feet? So I think keeping it a number that we can all recollect and tell architects and remind everybody, what it's starting to feel like is as we get to the end of a code change, somebody wants 50, somebody wants 100, 75, all in favor say aye. I'm tired, let's go home. We don't want that kind of stuff in there. And I'm glad Tony shared the logic of 20 foot, 25, 20, whatever that was. So I think this is a good number.
Excellent. All right. What about, so I didn't hear anything really about number 2, but it did 1.3. What do we need to do to 1.3 to make this good for everybody?
Would it make sense to just get rid of everything after exit passageway?
Yeah, that's a defined term.
And then
Yeah,
you're left up to the more specific situation of the building and NFPA 20 to define what your rating is.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you have to have a door at the end of your stair corridor to the fire pump room? Does that make sense?
They took, yeah, shoot, ICC ruled on that with exit passageways tied to stairs, and I'm pretty sure they said you don't need a door between exit passageway and stair enclosures. So if the room is rated the same as the exit passageway, I don't know what precedent there would be to mandate a door.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the question.
But I think it's a good change, just my own opinion. I think it's a good change because both corridor and exit passageway are defined with ratings, and corridor is consistent, but exit passageway changes with the rating of the interior stair enclosures, which I think is what the initial intent was for this section.
Yeah, the unfortunate portion though, Brad, is that corridors can drop down to a half-hour rating depending on occupant load and occupancy. So I think what we can do to make this section simpler and correlate to NFPA 20 and help the architects is anything under a high rise should be 1 hour. And high rise and above is obviously 2 hours, and that's already prescribed by NFPA 20.
And that's the rating for the fire pump room itself?
That's correct, and the routes to get to it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
section
Robert,
14.1 of NFPA 20.
Steven, did you still have a comment?
Yeah, my suggestion, I'd like the reference from NFPA 20, but I would suggest we actually put that language in this section so that the architect doesn't have to call Michael and ask what does NFPA 20 say.
I usually ask for 3
or
hours.
Tony, or me, or any of us on this call, that it says, a 1 hour fire pump room gets a 1 hour corridor, a 2 hour fire pump room gets a 2 hour corridor. And then, because we're trying to make this user friendly, that's what we should do. So.
And sometimes we ought to not try to put in metrics that could possibly change for code by just putting in the code. Would it be simpler just to, where it's read there, just say per NFPA 20? Travel path from the exterior to the fire pump room shall be through a corridor exit passageway.
In accordance with NFPA 20?
Yeah, The problem, George, is I don't know a single architect that owns a copy of NFP 20.
Well, they may have to buy one. Let's say Steve, that's the whole point of this.
Well,
Yeah.
You can
So
view
we-
all of the NFPA standards online for free. That's what I did.
Yeah. But at least it gives them a place to go.
all right, so what does NFPA 20 say
Robert, is
specifically?
that?
Yeah, I have it up. Do you want the exact wording or the quick
No,
summary
just-
here?
The exact wording.
The
Well,
exact
is it in
wording,
there?
if that's what you want me
Yeah.
to put here.
I think, Shauna, it's not as clear as we're thinking. Because it says fire pump units serving high-rise buildings should be protected from surrounding occupancies by a minimum of 2-hour fire-rated construction. And then another section indicates indoor fire pump rooms in non-high-rise buildings shall be separated in accordance with table 4114, which talks about the sprinklered and non-sprinklered in 1 hour or 2 hour.
It's 1 hour for non-high-rise.
Gotcha.
That's in a
Right.
fully sprinklered building.
So,
What about
so there's a
travel
condition. Oh, I'm sorry.
travel past the exterior of the fire pump room shall be through a corridor or exit passageway with a minimum fire resistance rating as required for the fire pump room or something
Yeah.
like that.
Tony, did you say that there's a unsprinklered option? So you could have a fire pump in a non-sprinklered building?
Well,
Which
you
is-
could have a partially sprinklered building.
Okay. I just think that's kind of an oxymoron a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the logic of that one too.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's
That's-
partially
It
sprinkled.
was for the
options.
pool, Brian.
All right, so travel path from the exterior to the fire pump room shall be through a corridor. You could do it a corridor or passageway with a minimum fire resistant rating to match the room,
Fire
Right.
pump room.
fire pump room. You could do it that way, or you can specify travel
Sounds-
path from the exterior to a fire pump room 4 stories or less is this, and then, or high rise is this.
I liked your first one, Sean. It's simpler.
Okay,
Yeah.
with a minimum fire resistance rating to match.
And Shauna, I'm wondering, do we have to specify corridor or passageway? Can we just say through via protected path?
Travel path from the exterior to the fire pump room shall be through a protected pathway.
I think that was
Is that a
Glenn's
defined
part.
term?
That was Glenn's part he came up with to define it more towards a already defined term, I guess.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
if
what
you're
I was just trying to acknowledge, is it exit or exit access? And then along with that, I had just put a minimum 1 hour rating. You could say, shall be protected with a fire resistance rating of 1 hour or equal to that of the pump room, whichever is greater, something like that.
I have a question. Are we deleting exit passageway or keeping that? And my question is, aren't we limited on what can communicate to an exit passageway? But in this, we're suddenly saying that a fire pump room can communicate to an exit passageway? Meaning, doesn't it have to be an occupied room or space? And a fire pump room, because we can't put electrical rooms, we can't put typically fire pump rooms. So I would just say corridor and not use exit passageway unless I'm misreading something.
How do I get this to I don't know why. So you want me to take out exit passageway?
I'm
Yeah,
just
since you're spec-
asking, if you put exit passageway, then now we can have a fire pump communicating to an exit passageway. And normally, projects that I've worked on, I have to tell the architect, we can't communicate to an exit passageway because with the fire pump room and with other rooms that aren't normally occupied. If I'm misreading it, somebody jump in, but that's how I've always heard it.
No, I think that's right. We're specifying a corridor with a minimum rating, so that allows it to serve whatever, there may be offices off of that pathway too, so.
Correct, but do we want to include exit passageway?
No, I'm agreeing with you that since you're
Okay.
specifying a corridor with a minimum rating, you won't get into
Got it.
that
you.
realm where you have half an hour ratings in the corridors.
Makes sense.
So since this is in the basement, would we say a corridor and enclosure?
Needs to imply that there's a stair also. And usually we use the exit stair.
So you would say it through a corridor and stair enclosure with a minimum fire resistance rating of 1 hour. Then the problem comes up if that stair enclosure communicates with one of the stair enclosures in the building serving an upper floor. That upper portion might have to be rated 2 hours.
Right. And typically that's what we see. I would say 95% of the time is a standard exit stairway utilized to access the fire pump room.
But you're specifying a minimum here.
A minimum of 1 hour or match the fire resistance rating of the fire pump room, whichever is greater. So if the fire pump room is 2 hours, then it has to be 2 hours. Otherwise, it can be an hour.
But the only time a fire pump room is rated 2 hours is if you have a partially sprinklered building.
Or a high rise.
Or a high rise.
But 4-story, like 5, 6, 7 stories would require a 2 hour interior stair enclosure.
But a 1 hour room.
Yeah.
That I think that's why we had written it like it was originally, Brad. Which it was the interior exit stairway enclosure requirements for the building. We're driving the minimum rating.
Okay, well, we're spending a really long time on this. We are an hour in almost and haven't got through proposal number 1. So my suggestion is to either table this and have the group go back knowing what the comment is on this and figure it out, or we need to really figure out something soon. Brian, I see your hand up. Brian Kennedy.
My mistake, sorry.
No worries. Sorry, I have a horrible cold, so if I'm not pronouncing your names.
So Shauna, how about I make a motion? Can I make a motion to
Whatever you
approve
want.
as modified?
Approve as modified as what's shown on the screen right now?
Correct.
You can make that motion. Didn't seem like everybody agreed with this, but yes, you can make that motion.
Real quick, Shauna, right after corridor, you need to keep that or.
Why? Because there's an and. They made it an and.
Oh, wait, through. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that and on the end there. Okay.
Yeah, through
got
a
it.
corridor and
Yep,
stair
I see that.
enclosure.
Just got your back there. Okay.
No worries. All right. All right. Well, Tony has a motion for as further modified with what you see on the screen right here. Is there a second?
I'll second. Steve.
Stephen. All right. Stephen Roninelli is second. All right. Is we can have some discussion, but we're gonna have to wrap this up. So, is this good enough? to get
Shauna, will
through
you
the
make
full
that,
cycle, or what do you want?
will you make that stairway enclosure? I think that's gonna be more accurate. Stair is just one component of a stairway. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there's no discussion, I'm going to call the vote here. Stephen, you have your hand up, or is that from just for a second?
Well, I did if you needed some justification, but if you're calling for the vote,
Okay.
I'm good with that too. So.
If you want to provide justification for a simple justification, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. So speaking in support of the motion on the floor as amended, I think increasing the distance to 75 foot makes it much clearer. And I think it also addresses the issue of getting a rated corridor accessing the fire pump room. It could be tweaked a little, but I think it should be approved as modified.
Right, excellent. Any other discussion? Seeing
Yeah, I
none.
guess,
Oh, there's
sorry,
some.
I should have raised my hand. I apologize. Yeah, I guess I think we're right there on the edge of it, but I agree wordsmithing on the fly in a meeting is not the way to go. I'm going to vote against it just because I think there's language we could pull right out of the code, I think, and drop into this section and have it say what we want it to say. So I'm going to vote against it. And if it fails, I would like to move to table it. And I'll take a crack at it if nobody else wants to.
All right. So the motion on the floor is for as modified, further modified by what you see on the screen. All those in favor of as further modified by what you see on the screen, please raise your hand. I'm seeing 3 opposed. Oh, wait. I didn't lower everybody's hands, so I'm going to try this one more time.
Shauna, there was four that voted for it.
Okay, I'm gonna lower the hands. All those opposed. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so and then all of those abstaining. Well, let me lower the hands. All those abstaining. None. So that motion fails as modified, fails with a vote of 4 to 8.
Move to table.
Move to table. Okay, I need a date specific. So our next hearing is, when did you say? April 16th? That's our last one. Like, this is it, right? So our last one is April 16th, and at the rate we're going today, we're gonna have a lot on that agenda. So table to April 16th or 13th or whatever day that is.
It's
Our next-
13th.
13th, okay.
And I'll second that, Sean.
Okay, thank you. Now what I need to know is who's gonna work on this if we table it.
Brad, I'm happy to help since I already was involved in this if you'd like, but
Yeah, no,
rate-
that'd be, yeah, if you would take the lead and we could just email back and forth, that would be perfect.
yep, I'm gonna rely on you for the rating stuff. That's not exactly my wheelhouse, but yeah, I'm happy to help.
Okay, I'll see if I can find, I'm thinking of specific language in chapter 10. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Okay, so I have Brad Emmerich and Robert Merlino and Glenn.
And I'll stay involved, Shauna, Tony.
Okay, and Tony. All right. All right, so the motion on the floor is to table to April 13th. All of those in favor, please raise your hand. It looks 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it tells me how many if I hover over it, I think, or something like that. I can't-
Craig raises his
Oh,
hand, but
10.
it's a video.
Okay, so I have 10, and let me lower the hands, and all of those opposed. 1.
Sorry, I
Alright.
raised my hand. I just lost my screen, so I couldn't push the little hand raise button.
Okay, you raised it for opposition, Craig?
No,
Or for support? Okay, so 11. So 11 to 1. Is there anybody that is abstaining? Somehow. we're
No,
not-
Shauna, sorry, my count at the beginning was wrong. We have 12 voting today.
Oh, you have 12 voting. Okay, then that makes sense then. Okay,
Yep.
All right, so that passes. We're gonna hear that item on November. I'm gonna save this so that you guys can, and I'll send it to you, Brad and Robert, so that you'll have what we worked on today. Just so that you know. Oops, 16. All right, I'm gonna save that so that we have it. Yeah, whatever. Okay, we need to get moving though. Thank you guys. That was a lot of great discussion, but a little too much. So we're gonna move on to item number 6. Item number 6 is John Wojcicki, so I'll get to him. We haven't looked at this one yet, affecting 903-311. So, John, let me. There's a hand up, Mike Stewart. Did you need to say something before we get going, or you had a hand up? No. Okay. Well, John Wojcicki, I'm gonna mute Mike then because.
Donna, let me just, as before we get into these next 3, just to clarify something for the committee, your current code amendments end at 903.10. There were 3 proposals all geared to continue from that point. So when I put these together, they're 903.11, 903.12, and 903.13. But regardless of what happens between what's approved or not, when we create the final document, we will correct that to be in order, just so folks understood that there is nothing in the code right now past 903.10, and all 3 are to come after that, and it all depends on what's approved or not.
903.310, you mean?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, excellent, thank you.
Basically, we have 3 proposals for the same spot, but I
Right.
just ordered them consecutively. So it was, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Gotcha. Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so this proposal is John. John, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is John Wojcicki, and I am presenting this on behalf of the organization. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to open the correct version. This is the one that was. You need to go to the web page. The one on the web page is correct.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, I downloaded a while ago. So 903.311. Actually, I thought I downloaded that one today, but apparently not.
It's right below. There you go.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, this proposal is in essence it's a reorganization for the most part. There was a lot of text that was in section 907.6.7, which is for fire alarm, that referenced pre-action sprinkler systems and clean agent systems. And so we've taken text from that section and moved it into the appropriate 903 for sprinklers and 904 for alternate suppression systems, so that it's clear to the people who are installing the piping side of that what is required of them. The only new section that, or the only new text that has been added is the last line of 903.311, which says that the installation of double interlock pre-action systems shall be, sorry, that was not, there was another section, excuse me, that says, it's in the 907.6.7, that says that double interlock pre-action systems cannot also have cross-zoned detection systems. So 903.311 takes all of the text from 907.6.7 that referenced pre-action sprinkler systems, puts it in one place. The 904.10 does the same thing for clean agent automatic fire extinguishing systems, essentially simply taking the information from 907.6.7 and putting it in one place to tell people what they need to submit, and that both the sprinkler system or clean agent system and the detection system have to be submitted together. And then these strikeouts here basically are just to move us down. We have the same 907.6.7.1 has not been changed, but the text that was up above has either been moved to the pre-action or sprinkler or clean agent, or it's been broken up into these paragraphs to clarify. And one of the sections, the 907.6.7.3 for cross-zone detection, says that double interlock pre-action systems cannot have cross-zone detection. And the reason for that is pre-action systems already delay the response of the system and the application of water on a hazard, and a cross-zone detection is not required to have increased density of detection, so it also delays the activation. So there is a double delay that's introduced with cross-zone detection, double interlock pre-action without a commensurate increase in life safety. So that's basically the whole concept is to move things into the proper sections and then make sure that everyone, both on the fire alarm side, if they're looking here, or on the piping side, if they're looking above, knows that they have to submit their materials along with the materials for either the piping or the detection, so that everything is in one package so we can review it accurately.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this proposal? Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, committee? Glenn, you
I
have
have
your
a
hand up.
question. On the very first section, 903.311, the last sentence, installation of double interlock pre-action systems shall be subject to approval by the fire code official. I'm confused of where I'm allowed to do a double interlock pre-action system by reading this, and what the point of having that is in there is, when you tell me in the sentence above, double interlock systems are allowed. So what's the point of leaving it up to approval when you're telling me they're allowed?
The language is pulled directly from the existing 907.67. The last sentence that was struck. I believe it was somewhere in here. Hold on, sorry. Sorry, it's what used to be 907.672. What used to be 907.672 has been struck entirely. That section has been just moved wholesale up to the section on pre-action systems. It's not added.
Okay, makes sense. Then I guess the question is Denver allowing or not allowing double interlock systems? Because I don't know by reading this.
Well, it's saying that we can that it's approved, that pre-action systems that are approved for use can be the single, non, and double interlock. If you want to use a double interlock, you have to get yes, you have to get approval from the fire code official, because again, the problem with double interlock systems is they delay application of water. And so this is there are times when it is entirely appropriate, places where you're in you're putting systems outside where there's freezing, you have a system that's being installed in a commercial freezer, and there are other places where the justification for use of that double interlock system should be provided by the design professional to indicate why, for example, they'd want to have a double interlock delayed system activating in a server room, for example. It's allowed, but it's subject to approval.
It says that the pre-action systems that are approved for use in NFPA are single, non, and double. But if you want to use the double, you got to get approval. This is the way that I'm reading that.
Yeah,
That
I
was
guess my
intent.
why make people jump through an extra hoop? Either they're allowed or they're not.
Robert, I think it's a more positive spin on excluding it and having an exception. Why not just say, hey, we acknowledge there's 3 different types of systems. Look, if you're going to do double interlock, you're going to have to go an extra step. And to me, it's just a positive spin on knowing that, hey, double interlock needs to be specially treated. I mean, that's how I've looked at it over all these years.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, and I think, Robert, traditionally, we have not, or we've only allowed double interlock in freezer applications. And I thought that was in the code somewhere. I'm struggling to find it right now. But traditionally, that's what we've done in Denver for probably 20 plus years now.
Thank you, Brad.
I just had a question on the very last portion of the section about the submittal requirements. Do you think it'll cause any confusion And you've done a nice job splitting up the electronics from the suppression side. But we put the submittal requirements under the suppression side. Is that, should it be duplicated or located?
It is
in a more
duplicated.
general-
Yeah, it's duplicated in each of the sections. If we scroll up to the to the 903 and 904 sections, it talks about it and says that you also have to submit the fire alarm component with it. One of the issues that we've run into, for example, is we require that the control panel be directly outside the area of protection, and that may not be obvious from the fire alarm drawings.
Brad, I think this really is a positive step. We were talking about this literally yesterday in a combined meeting with fire alarms and fire protection companies. And having a requirement to create a joint submittal, whether it be led by the fire protection or led by the fire alarm, is a very good step in the right direction. A lot of those answers, for the questions that Tony and his people are going to have get solved when we have that communication up front. So long as the references are back and forth, I know there's a lot of duplication, and John, I appreciate what you're doing here. At least it gets the fire protection and the fire alarm folks communicating at the same time.
Ryan?
I guess I just wanted to go back to Tony's commentary about only allowing the double interlock systems for freeze protection. If do you want to clarify that and just tell people that they can use it in a freeze protection application, and other applications are subject to fire code approval, fire code official approval? I mean, the intent is to try to prevent less paperwork for you, right?
So you're saying like installation of double interlock protection systems shall be allowed in freezer
Freeze protection
applications,
applications, or
all others subject to approval by code official?
I don't know if that's worthwhile or not, or are they all?
I wonder, Glenn, is it possible to scan the existing amendments and see if that freezer section is still in there? And I don't know, George or Steve Ronanelli, if you remember or recall removing that in the previous code committee cycles.
I don't remember specifically removing that. The only time we were allowed the double interlock was in freezer application, but
I don't remember moving it either, Tony, but I do remember there's very few applications that double interlock pre-action is allowed. And I'll say even in some commercial freezer applications, it's not been permitted.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the language subject to approval is in there, because I think it was prior to that language being added, it was pretty clear that you could use double interlock pre-action in those kind of freezer applications, commercial, like a Safeway freezer warehouse kind of thing. But it's been subject to approval for quite a few cycles.
And Brian, I think to address your point, in this case, I think it addresses that, hey, we're going to have that requirement because it is a special case. I'm pointing out to other people that they can do it under these special cases. I'm not sure it adds anything to the writing or to the timing that we would take to approve the amendment.
That's fine.
I guess my question is why does that need to be there other than it's always been there? I mean, they build freezers in Aurora, and other cities allow double interlock systems. So why does Denver have to be different about this?
I'm from California, and in San Francisco Bay Area during the 2000-2001 push for for the server farms, double interlock pre-action systems were installed in every single suite. And I think that the purpose of this is to control the use of double interlock pre-action systems. It's not just for freezers, it's used throughout the industry. It's used more extensively, and this provides Denver with the capability to say whether or not we approve it.
So Tony, real quick, regard to your question, I searched back to the 2016 code, And there is no mention of freezer. It actually is exactly stated as it is, where it says it's approved in accordance with an FPA 13, and then that second sentence. That's as far back as I have currently, just at my fingertips.
All right. I would love to hear a motion be brought forward for this proposal.
I propose a motion to accept as written.
Is there a second? Stephen, is
Second.
that a second?
Second,
Okay. All right, some justification?
I think it clears it up and gets it in both sections. Having it both in 904 as well as in 907 is the right way to go.
Okay. Moved and seconded for as submitted. Any other discussion?
I agree. I love that it's putting this in 903. My heartburn just on the double interlock piece, but I can live with it.
Excellent, thank you. All right, with
I-
that, I'm going to, go ahead, Brian.
I have a little older version of the Denver code here at my desk. So the 2011 amendments have the paragraph, the section at the end of 907.762 says double interlock pre-action system shall be approved for freezer facilities.
Right.
So that was
And there-
that was
That was in
strict.
the 11? In the 11 and then stricken out after that. So maybe there must have been,
16. No, there was that 5-year period. So we went
yeah,
11 to 16.
so there must have been some freezer application that you really didn't want it in or something, and so,
What section number was that from 11 again, if I may?
907.7.6.2.
all right, so the motion on the floor is for as submitted. All those in favor of as submitted, please raise your hand. And that vote is 12, so there shouldn't be anybody else to vote. That passes unanimously. All right, thank you all for that. We're going to move on. I'm gonna lower all the hands and I can find the button every time. All right, so as submitted. The next one is item number 42. Hopefully I have the most current version, but let me know. If I do not, this is Tony. I downloaded these a couple weeks ago, so I might not have the most recent version. Cody, this is you on the master pressure reducing valve.
Yeah, so what what we've seen recently with a lot of new sprinkler contractors coming to town, the method of designing separate sprinkler risers versus standpipe risers has gained a lot of use here recently. So one of the things I'm trying to do with this code change is allow the concept, but make sure that we have some level of reliability, that if a single PRV is installed in controlling many floors of sprinkler systems, that we have a double method so that maintenance and testing can take place on that component and not bring the entire building out of protection while that's happening. So it reduces the extent of fire watch, but also improves the reliability because we now have two valves in series like NFPA 14 dictates. So again, this is fairly a new concept that we've seen with the new out-of-town sprinkler designers and being used in several high rises. So I would ask for your support to improve our reliability of systems. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Tony. Anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item? Anyone from the public? Seeing none. Committee, what do you think?
Tony, can you clarify more specifically where you're seeing this and how it's being arranged?
Yeah, Robert, we've had It's been common that we use this arrangement in open garages. So we'll have a manifold that supplies, 6, 7, 8 tiers of garage levels. But recently it's been used to supply occupied floor plates where they have a dedicated riser for sprinklers. And rather than putting a PRV at each floor takeoff, they're doing one master PRV at the base of riser. This-
How many floors are you seeing worst case scenario?
Ooh, I want to say we've seen it in 20-story buildings, up to 20 stories.
So they'll put a master PRV in the pump room or something and run a complete separate riser up in the stair feeding the sprinkler zones?
Correct.
And then they'll just have zone controls as you normally would?
That's correct. And so what happens every time that component needs servicing or testing, we're bringing down the whole building from having any kind of active sprinkler protection, which is a bad thing. And then if there's major issues with it, it goes out of service, and now we're doing fire watch for the entire 20-story building, which has been tough on the fire department.
So I guess in general, I agree with your point here. It's bad design, in my opinion, to do it that way. And I wouldn't recommend anyone do it that way. But at the same time, I have cost concerns with this, both initial and ongoing, because you're adding a second PRV, which requires annual testing, and you add a bunch of tamper switches, which also require testing. My second concern is I'm not crazy about the wording of this, and I think it would need some pretty significant rewrite to get to a point that is palatable. So both of those being said, my initial inclination would be to not support this.
And I think on the cost side, Robert, remember, if you're putting a PRV on every floor already, like has been standard in Denver for many years, I'm assuming either option probably has equivalent cost.
Yeah, I would agree. More so when you're doing dry valves, there's a cost difference there.
Yeah, but obviously the way it's been done now with a single PRV, there's probably cost savings. Cheaper to buy one PRV than outfit, 14 or 20 stories of PRVs.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that.
But I agree with you that it's a horrible design to use this methodology, but the code does not prevent it.
Anybody else? A motion?
I was just gonna make a comment here. When I first looked at this, I was concerned that this was generic in nature. But master pressure reducing valves, Tony, you're really referring to a solution where they're really planning on putting in just one PRV for the entire structure, which I think everybody agrees that's not the intent in Denver for a long time. So is it a language issue for this? Is that we're now just need a definition for a master reducing? Robert?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. It's definitely a language issue on how you define master pressure reducing valves, and possibly how you define how many zones are allowed to be downstream from either a single PRV or even a redundant PRV. And the reference to the arrangement in NFPA 14, I think would need some cleanup as well, because that would require some specific things I don't know that would be intended in this situation, such as tying in a fire department connection downstream of the PRV arrangement.
But the intent is to try to avoid what Tony's described, which I fortunately haven't seen this, but I can certainly see the problem. Just one PRV in a building.
Yeah, and what I've seen more typically is the master PRV upstream of a bunch of dry valves in the parking garage, which I think could be easily designed around. I have not seen the whole building PRV thing like Tony talked about. And yeah, that's a bad deal in my opinion.
Well, why not prohibit that installation then?
Yeah, that may be a better solution. Yeah. Is Tony, I mean, how much of these are really, I mean, how often is this actually done?
I would say it's probably something we've seen in the last 5 years and has been used in several high rises. And again, you know, there's nothing in code that prohibits it. And that's what we've been struggling with.
All right, do you guys have some suggested language for him to fix it? Or do we have a motion for approval, disapproval?
I would motion to table, I guess.
Oh, is there a way we can fix it?
No,
Or-
not easily, or we're gonna be here an hour talking about language.
Okay, keeping in mind, we only have one meeting left and we can't table everything. Steven, Ron, and Ellie.
You know, I guess that we need to have a little conversation here. If things are not ready to move forward, we need to take action on them and disapprove them. If we can wordsmith it a little bit and make it much better, then we should try to do that. But we're not going to get through this if we table everything and everything goes back. So the charge to this committee is, and no disrespect to you, Tony, but you know, if there's not adequate justification to the committee or it requires too much work, we should not feel compelled to table everything just to get it in the code. We have to respond to what was presented to us, and it's okay to send it back for next time. And unless we're convinced that something of an urgent matter has to happen to make it right. So I caution the group that we be tabling everything here, and we'll be going till next year, and we can't do that.
Very well said.
Yeah, I think along what you said, Steve, I think, you know, the common trend among all the comments is we all agree that this is bad design and we really need to address it for a safety perspective and a systems reliability perspective. So I'd move the motion to approve as written and let the committee decide.
Well, there's a motion for tabling already, so I have to hear the motions first, right? Motion on the table for tabling it, but I'm saying, like Steven, we can't table everything. Is there a second to that motion? I'm gonna dispense with that motion. So is there a second? George, is that a second?
I'm going to second the tabling, and the reason for that logic is I think this is a technical discussion. I think this is the wordsmithing on this one is important because it is highly technical. There's only really two choices in my mind, and that's either Steve's, where we just let you try again 3 years from now, but if this is a real issue, we ought to take the 3 weeks and let Robert and some others try to work on some language that would not encompass everything, but only deal with what the problem is. And I think right now, defining master pressure reducing valve and NFPA 14 is just too open from my perspective.
All right, there's a motion and a second for tabling till April 13th. It sounds to me that we need that working group is going to be Robert and Tony and
I can help.
George. If this passes, Robert, Tony, George. All right, so something to keep in mind. The motion is for tabling till the next meeting. If this motion passes, we'll move to the next item. If this motion fails, then you still have the opportunity to, as submitted, as modified, or disapproved. But we need to get moving.
Can I speak in opposition to tabling?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
So this is Steve Rondinelli speaking in opposition to tabling the motion. I understand the urgency of the issue. I understand the poor design and I would speak in opposition to tabling the motion and support, and I guess if overturned, support approval of the motion due to the urgency of trying to get this fixed. I think wordsmithing, adding some language, the end result is that we need to get it fixed, and I don't believe tabling it will make that fix. So
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else? I'm going to call the motion. All right, the motion is to table to April 13th. All those in favor of tabling, please raise your hand. Looks like we have 8 in favor of tabling. All those opposed? Oops, Stephen, you had your hand up and then you took it down.
oh yeah,
1, 2, 3.
Sorry.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yep.
All those opposed, 3. And then is there somebody that is abstaining? 1. Okay. All right. Well, the motion to table is passes 8 to 3 to 1. I'm going to really, really, really encourage you to not do that anymore. I
Tony,
get it. I get it.
Tony,
I
I'm going to
get
reach
it.
out to you to probably come down and meet with you about that one, because I'm going to need to know some of the intent behind that, I think, to help rewrite it.
Excellent.
Perfect. We can
Robert,
do
let me
that.
know. Robert, let me know and I'll go with you.
Yeah.
All right. The next item up for bid is item number 43. John Wojcicki, I believe you have
Hello.
the ability to speak. So yes.
This is John Wojcicki speaking on behalf of the Denver Fire, the organization. This proposal is addressing a potential concern related to aging sprinkler systems. Denver in particular has a number of older buildings, and we've seen sprinkler systems up to 80 years old that are being repurposed in new spaces. There are a number of studies that I've referenced for you in this proposal that indicate that although the Hazen-Williams C factor is already a slight degradation, it may not fully represent a long-term aging of sprinkler piping. And so from that perspective, the proposal is to identify reduced C factors from NFPA 13 values for sprinkler systems that were installed more than 30 years ago, unless an engineering analysis based on internal inspection of pipes demonstrates that higher values to a maximum of those provided in NFPA 13 are appropriate. That's the purpose of this. I'm not sure why that phrase is repeated twice, with the exception, but so that obviously would be potential wordsmithing. But that's the intent, is to take our steel pipe of 120, drop it to 100, dry pipes, drop it from 100 to 80, concrete or asbestos from 140 to 130, cast or ductile iron unlined, I think from 100 to 90, plastic or plastic line from 150 to 130, and copper tube remains at 150 because it's not subject. That was the point, and I will stop now.
Okay. Anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item? Anybody from the public? All right. I do see that there is some wordsmithing that needs to take place, because I think it's supposed to say shall be reduced to the following values unless an engineering analysis is done.
So-
and then you don't need.
Actually, everything from provided to appropriate is struck. Everything after the colon is not supposed to be there because it's put in the exception instead.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to say. You can either leave it there or put the exception, but the provided below didn't need to be there. All right. Oops. Shoot. All right. It looks like Brad, you're up.
I just had a question for John. Where did the reduced values come from?
Those reduced values were, I believe there was some discussion in one of these reports that provided some of them. I'm sorry, this was done back in August. I don't remember the specific how the specific values came about. I believe they were in those references that I provided.
Thank you.
Robert?
I'm going to motion to disapprove, and I can provide my concerns, whether I got a second or a different motion.
Okay, there's a motion to disapprove. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Michael? All right,
Yeah.
so Robert, you want to give your justification?
Yeah, I have a few main concerns about this. First concern, NFPA is already providing reduced values from what new pipe has. So you're already having some level of reduction to your C value. Next, this is a nationwide issue. Everywhere in the country has old pipe, and this is something that wouldn't be specific to Denver and should be addressed by NFPA on a national level if they feel as though it's a problem. Third, the 30 years. I don't know how you're going to find out or justify which systems are 30 years old or why 30 years was picked. Lastly, that I'm aware of, there's no engineering basis out there to correlate an internal inspection or even a sonic inspection to a C value of pipe. So that's, again, just leaving it up to further interpretation and no solid engineering basis behind it.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I would like to add that last week I visited the building 72. Had no ceiling. I looked up and there's all different types of pipe. I don't understand how can anyone figure out which pipe was 30 years old and which pipe was installed is 2 years old. And I mean, I am in total agreement with Robert.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else? Robert? Okay, nobody wishing to speak. Then the motion on the floor is for disapproval.
Do
All
I
those in, oh,
get an
sorry.
opportunity to respond to the comments?
Oh, I thought that I asked you. I said Robert, I meant John. I'm so sorry, John.
It's okay. So in response to the comments, the comment about the age, the 30 years is, as I recall from NFPA 13's handbook, the typical expected age of a lifetime of a sprinkler system is 30 years. It doesn't mean that every sprinkler system is replaced. It means that is the expected duration of the lifeline of that system. And so that was the reason why the 30 years was picked. If you wanted to say that there's some other age like 50 years because 50 years is used for replacement of sprinklers, that is also reasonable, but that was the reason for the basis for the 30 years. The point of this was not each individual piece of pipe. It was the system itself. So yes, there are going to be small pieces of pipe that are going to be replaced on a regular basis, but the overall system age is going to be the age of the system, which is definable. With regards to engineering analyses, Denver has had someone conduct an engineering analysis based on a 5-year on internal inspection of the piping to demonstrate that the internal investigation showed that there were no tubercles or other significant decrease in the diameter of the piping, and the piping essentially resembled the corrosion expected for the NFPA 13 values in terms of reduction of pipe diameter and surface roughness. And so that kind of analysis is possible. And I'll note, as I've said in the supporting information, that NFPA 13 requires, or NFPA 25 requires, an internal investigation on a 5-year basis of all sprinkler piping. And the one system that we did require to do this investigation hadn't had one, as far as we know, ever. There's no records of it ever happening. So this is also a kind of a further means to justify an internal investigation of the sprinkler piping with a purpose to demonstrate that the piping is still viable and doesn't have significant corrosion. I believe I've hit all the points.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Anybody on the committee want to rebut anything?
If you wanted to write in code something about requiring internal inspections, I'd be full in support of that. I just don't think this is the way to go about that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Tony with Denver Fire Department, and I'd like to support John and support this concept. I'd highlight to the committee that a lot of our warehouses that were built in the 60s and 70s are now coming down to that point where you have to have a 50-year test on the sprinklers. And once we've undertaken that analysis, we've also been looking at the 5-year pipe test, which is already dictated by NFPA 25. And what becomes a challenge is when you look at these pictures of the different degradation out there, it's really tough because we have to sit down with every project and negotiate what that degradation looks like and how we should adjust the hydraulics. It's been very tedious on our end and also very difficult for the designers. And I think this section bypasses a lot of the need for those meetings and different dialogue. And we all come to an agreement on what it should be as a middle of the road based on what we're seeing. But again, the code requires a full sprinkler testing at 50 years. And that's 10 years for ESFRs, 10 and 15 years under the new NFP 25. And so this has become more prevalent and a bigger problem in recent years. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else? Stephen.
I wasn't going to speak, but I'm also in support of the motion on the floor for disapproval. And my primary reason is that this is, I believe, is more standard language that belongs in NFPA as a standard, not in a code as a requirement. The danger of moving some of the things over from 13, you moved them all over, you can't get everything over there. If we want to mandate an engineering analysis, just like Robert said, then you put it in, but don't put these little bits and pieces, in my opinion, in. We need to let the standards do what the standards do and let that be guided at that level. So speaking in support of the motion on the floor for disapproval.
All right, thank you so much. All right, anybody else? No? All right, I am going to call the motion or call this item number 43 is for disapproval. All those in favor of disapproval of item 43, please raise your hand. It looks like a vote of 9. All those in opposition of disapproval. And 4. How do we get 13 again? And hopefully no abstentions, because then we'd really have a problem. All right, so disapproval, item number 43 was disapproved with a vote of 9-4.
Stephen was up there twice. So
That's why. All right, so 9-3.
My bad.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna not see that. And then so that brings us to item number 40. Item number 40, which is section 90342 with alarms. John.
Hi, it's me again.
Hi, John.
Okay, so this one is a much simpler and hopefully quick to release.
I didn't take a break.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to take a break?
I know. It's okay. We'll hear this one and then I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I keep forgetting to give you guys a break.
So this one is some minor modifications to the text to 90342. First, to make it clear that it's not every system that's required to have an audible or visible device, but only each building or structure. So that if I have a building with, a warehouse with 16 zones, I don't need to have 16 alarms outside. It may be obvious, but that's not the way it's written. We also make sure that it's indicated that the sprinkler water flow alarm devices are to be activated in accordance with section 912.6, which has some specific language about that. And then finally, that where the fire alarm system is installed, actuation of the automatic sprinkler system activates both the building fire alarm system and approved notification scheme. That element just simply, again, clarifies that it's supposed to be a notification of occupants if such exists.
There we go. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this item? Anyone from the public? Seeing none. Committee, questions, concerns, comments? Motion? Brad?
I was just gonna say, I'm all for clarity, so I think this helps. Anything that helps clear up the code. And I know we have to do it incrementally, which is unfortunate. The increments are 3 years in length, but any step we can make towards clarity, I think is good. So I would move to approve as submitted.
Alrighty, is there a second?
Then I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion for as submitted and a second. Any discussion?
Who was the second? Sorry,
It was George.
George, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any discussion, so you guys must want your break.
This is an easy one.
All right, all those in favor for as submitted of item number 40, please raise your hand. Well, we got 12 of you. And maybe that's all we're gonna get. All right, yes, that's all we have, 12. So that item passed unanimously. With that, I'm gonna take a break for 5 minutes max. Let's, go use a restroom, do whatever you gotta do. We'll come back in 5 minutes and then we will start with item number 54.
352, Shauna?
Sure. Sorry, there's a delay on my microphone whenever I mute it. 352. All right. I see in the public real quick that there's a hand raised from Mike Stewart. Mike, did you have a question? This is the second or third time I've seen that happen, so I just want to make sure that I'm giving you an opportunity to ask your question, Mike, if you have one. Maybe he's not there. I don't know how that hand keeps getting raised. All right. We're going to, Mike Stewart, do you have a question? Real quick. If not, I'm going to put your hand down. Okay, John, have at it. Item number 54.
Hello again, John White, representing Denver Fire. and this is a modification to 90343. The first part is to simply add a parenthetical floor control valve assembly, which basically just allows us to collect together the components to the left of it for use in the exception below. So basically we're saying an approved floor control valve assembly for isolation control and enunciation shall be provided for each level, including those where sprinklers are supplied by piping on the floor below of buildings meeting at least one of the following conditions: more than 2 stories with a total area of all floors, including mezzanines, exceeding the NFPA 13 system protection area limitations, or required to have standpipes in accordance with section 905. And then the exception is attic level sprinklers supplied from the level below are not required to have a separate floor control valve assembly. The reason for this is because Denver does not follow NFPA 13's allowance, and the section is 16.9.11.2, whereby you can combine the top 2 levels of a building and use one floor control valve. What we generally have, or often have, is 2 floor control valves on the second from the top level. All the piping is on that level, and then sprinklers pop up on risers individually to cover the floor above. So this makes it clear that even where we have all the piping on the floor below the top level, that top level still needs to have a floor control valve, with the exception of a wet pipe sprinkler system extended into a heated attic. And then, any attic that's protected by a dry system would have a separate flow switch. So that's already covered without our having to address it. So that's the purpose of this. There's some language clarification, but basically just making sure that everyone's aware that we need to have a floor control valve assembly for each level that has sprinklers.
Marvelous. Thank you so much. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this item? Anyone from the public? No? All right. Committee? Committee? Hello? I see all your faces.
I support the change. It helps clarify it. I would suggest maybe one further change, and maybe in the interest of time, we don't want to do this, but the new version of building code, which is being adopted, limits where you could do NFPA 13R systems, which is where a lot of this takes place related to exception 2 with standpipes. So my suggestion would be get rid of exception 2 and combine exception 1 into the main body of the text to simplify it even further.
That's reasonable to me. I don't know if you're waiting for my response, but.
Nope, that's just my comment.
Okay. Yeah, John, and you're okay with that? So you're saying take this wording, put it in the main paragraph, take out this meeting at least one.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
take this out.
Yep, exactly. And for some background on that, in the new building code, anywhere you have standpipes, it's going to push you to full NFPA 13, in which case NFPA 13 would push you to being zone per floor in that situation.
Robert, just a question. When you say the new building code, you talking the 2021 IBC or
2021 IBC has further language limiting NFPA 13R.
Very, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't in 2024 kind of.
Nope, it is in 2021.
And I guess another thing to make sure of, and I sit on that committee, is to make sure that the IBC committee isn't amending that section.
It's a 903 section, so it would have been this
come
committee if
here.
it was being amended.
We haven't gotten that far, but that's a good question.
The only limitation is that section 1 only talks about ones where the buildings exceed 52,000 square feet. So if I have a 3-story building or a 4-story building where each story is only 12,000 square feet, would be required to have a standpipe, but would not under this condition be required to have floor control valve assemblies. Even though it's 4 stories.
So essentially a small 4-story building.
Correct.
Yeah, that would be true. So I don't know what the intent behind this here is not, but
So you think we should leave this section in then?
I'm not certain that I understand the point, but I'm not certain that it's any more confusing to have it in there. You know, if there's a condition where we have a building that's required to have standpipes, this helps to address that condition, and most of the time will be caught by the exceeding or more than 2 stories and larger than 52,000 square feet.
all right. In the interest of moving this along, I would motion to approve as written.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor for as submitted of item number 54. Is there any second?
Second that.
Second was Mike Stewart. Mike Stewart, you can't second.
Yeah, Tony here, I'll second that.
Okay, Tony. All right, and how come that's weird? All right, so I have a motion for approval as submitted and a second. Any other discussion? No? All right, seeing none, I will call the motion. All those in favor of item 54 as submitted, please raise your hand. And I see a vote of 11. All those opposed? Aaron, is that an opposition? Or was that a late?
I was late. I
Okay.
thought I hit it, but I missed it.
That's
so.
okay. So 12. How do we keep ending up with these different numbers? Okay, but Stephen Rondinelli is an opposition.
No, I'm in favor. I
Okay,
thought I lowered my hand, but apparently I
that's
didn't.
okay. That's all right. So I just want to verify the count here because 15. Yeah, that motion was unanimous with a vote of 12-0. All right, let's bring up item number 47. So that one doesn't have to be saved. Item 47, manual activation, section 904.13.1, Brian Lucas, or looks like the city. I'm not sure if Brian is here, who will be presenting this item.
All right, this is Tony with Denver Fire Department. I'll speak
Okay.
on behalf of Brian.
Perfect.
So this is an interesting one we've encountered, building these micro kitchens now that are really small in their lease space. The fire code has traditionally required the kitchen hood suppression activation device to be 10 feet or greater from the exhaust hood that it's protecting. And when we're building these micro kitchens, there's not enough space to meet that distance. So NFPA has changed their language and does not require the 10-foot provision. And so I think Brian is acknowledging that here and allowing us to approve these new concepts despite the base fire code language. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this item? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, committee?
This looks pretty straightforward and looks like it's matching the reality of having smaller kitchens. I would soon make a motion to approve as written.
Okay, there's a motion for as submitted. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Second, Mike Stewart, you cannot second. I don't know.
This isn't Mike. Is this Mike? This is Russell Holt, actually.
Oh, it is. It says Mike Stewart on there when you talk.
Sorry. Yeah, no, this is Russell.
Okay, all right, that's why. All right. Okay, now we know. All right, good to know. That's why I keep asking, where's Mike Stewart? Okay, So I have a motion for as submitted in a second. Let's have some discussion. Brian?
Tony, can I ask a question? Does NFPA have a minimum distance since the 10 feet went away?
It actually does not, Brian.
Then do you, I mean, would it be simpler to say that shall not be more than 20 feet from the kitchen exhaust system? Just to match NFPA?
Yeah, but Brian, I think there's an intent that it be away from the system. You know, so I think if you just leave it as a minimum, all of a sudden you can start seeing this thing right in the line of fire.
Okay, just asking the question.
Anybody else?
I have one comment for the committee. When it's introducing the main section there's a parenthetical not part of the amendment, but yet there is an added underlined or at an approved location. And I'm wondering if you guys want that, because that kind of the exception is also an approved location, but it provides some guidance to the public as to what are the conditions in which you might be approving something different. And so to have it above as well, I'm just not, again, that opens up for you to be asked every single time. Perhaps it's more than 20 feet away. Oh, maybe that's an approved location. So if you only want to be questioned for specific approvals for when it's less than 10 feet, I would leave that only in the exception.
Thank you, Glenn. Tony or anybody want to speak to that? He's talking about right here, you have at an approved location here, but you also have a very specific at an approved location here. Do you need them both?
Glenn, that's a great observation, and I agree with you.
So thinking that we could remove the one in the main body. John, or who submitted, who?
Yeah,
spoke
I
to
made
this?
the motion. I'm willing to accept the motion as modified.
Okay, Brad?
Well, just real quick with that change, now the manual actuation device has to be 10 feet or more has to be outside of the cooking area in order for the fire code official to step in and say, to approve another location. And so I'm guessing, in fact, I think I've done kitchens where if they're long and horizontal and the doorway to the kitchen is kind of in the middle of the room. Well, anyway, I've done some where we had to approve a location that did not quite meet the 20 feet or the 10 feet. And so I hear, I don't know. Removing it constrains the fire code official's ability to choose. He or she can only make the choice when the device is placed, where 10 feet would put it outside the cooking area.
I see what you're saying.
Good.
That's a good, Brad.
Yeah, you're right, Brad. Those two topic sections are approving different concepts.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and just so the committee knows, one of the issues we had with item 2 was with these micro kitchens, the pull stations were ending up outside the small kitchen and then being tampered with by opposing tenants from other micro kitchens. So one kitchen was activating the suppression system in another kitchen. And so then we had to change our concept and put them back within each tenant space, even though they didn't meet the 10-foot requirement to prevent the tampering.
I still think this could be approved, you know, especially as written. And as we discussed with Brad, I think you need the 2 exceptions. It just allows you to do stuff within a large enough kitchen as well as stuff within a kitchen is too small.
Okay. So the original motion on the floor was for as submitted. We made a modification. You guys said, okay, I'm okay. But now we're unmaking it. I just want to propose, I want whoever made the motion to clarify that they want it as submitted and not as modified.
I'm going to continue to make them or remake the motion to submit as written.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other discussion? The motion on the floor for item number 47 is for as submitted. All those in favor of as submitted, please raise your hand.
That's Russell's head, not mice.
Okay, gotcha. That's weird. It's not even showing up here under either one because you don't have those. I've given you privilege to talk. That's why you don't have any camera. So I need to change that. Perfect. So that's a 13, a vote of 13, unanimous, 13-0. All right, excellent. Sally, would you be able to change Mike Stewart over to a presenter instead of a attendee?
And Shauna, before you close that, will you strike out the parenthetical not part of amendment? Just so that we don't confuse that later up in the heading, because that actually is part of the amendment with that new part there. We just strike that just with a strike
this
through.
word?
Yeah, just because that's incorrect. There we go. Thanks. Just so our notes are clear. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 12. Item number 12, which is section 90531, class 3 standpipe.
Who could it be?
John,
now?
I
Yes.
wonder.
Hello, everybody. This is John Wojcicki again, reporting for Denver Fire, making some minor modifications in section 90531, replacing class 3 with class 1, primarily because class 3 standpipes provide 1.5-inch hose for occupant use, and that's prohibited in Denver because we want the occupants to evacuate as their primary role. If it's gotten beyond the size, they can be extinguished by a fire extinguisher. Because of that change, the first exception, class 1 standpipes are allowed, is completely struck because it's already there. And then the remaining exceptions we're going to shift because they all basically reference different dry conditions. We're moving those underneath section 905.8 dry standpipes. So the existing exception becomes exception number 1, where subject to freezing and in accordance with NFPA 14. And the remaining exceptions from above are rewritten in exceptions 2, 3, and 4 for class 1 automatic dry standpipes in mixed-use open garage, single-use open parking garages, and manual dry standpipes in single-use open parking garages, which are less than 55 feet. So again, this is language that is just transferred from above, and that's it. Oh, and I'm sorry, exception number 4 from above, class 1 standpipes are allowed in basements, has also been struck because again, we're saying that everything is class 1. So that's the point of this submittal.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right, anybody from the public wishing to speak? Anybody from the public wishing to speak? Nothing, all right, committee? Stephen.
Question for John and maybe for Tony as well. So am I to understand there'll be no 1.5-inch connection in any standpipe cabinets any longer with this proposal? And I totally understand that it's not for occupant use, but for firefighting use. So they have the option of hooking up 1.5 inch versus 2.5 to 1.5 for 1.5 hose for mop up, et cetera. And it's probably just more an operational question. So.
If they want to connect a 1.5-inch hose to a 2.5-inch outlet, they could use a coupling. But class 3 standpipes provide for 1.5-inch hose, not just outlets.
So that disappears now in Denver. So there'll be no, in new buildings, there'll be no 1.5-inch connections for fire department use.
They're
So-
2.5 inches. Oh, sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me clarify. It's actually class 2 standpipes are what's intended for occupant use. We used to require class 3, which said the contractor would provide a 1.5 inch reducer and place that hardware. Now that went away in NFPA 14 2 editions ago. And we now carry reducers in all the high-rise packs. Because those were being tampered with and theft was a big problem. So now we just have a 2.5-inch outlet and crews have the option to plug an 1.5-inch reducer if they'd like. But the reality is we now use the 2.5-inch couplings with 2-inch hose has become prevalent.
Understand, and I understand that class 2s for occupant use only, so just thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering that starter sentence, Glenn, is that the current code section have that starter piece in it? 90531.
I can 90531. I can pull that up.
I'm not seeing that in the 19 amendments.
This is in the current, in the
Oh, in the
2021
base code, okay.
base code.
I do have a question though. When I went to take a look, it looks to me it's identical to the base code, isn't it? Or am I looking something incorrectly?
Well, the base code says class 3. He changed it to class 1.
No, the base code just says class. Can you go back really quick?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm sorry. 90531 in the base code has class 3, and that's been replaced with class 1, but the remainder of the text is the same.
I see.
And then our exceptions.
Okay, my mistake. I thought the base code said class 1 and not class 3. Great, thank you.
The
John.
exceptions say class 1.
So your current 2019 base code, your current code that you're on, not the I codes, all that's been amended are the exceptions.
So I'm sorry, I guess the entire paragraph of 90531 should have been underlined and then struck through the class 3, I guess is you're saying what you're saying I should have written, and I apologize.
No, I think it's
No, I think you're right.
it's presented. All that should have been, I should have cleaned that up to put the heading above the current exceptions, the heading that you have in your amendments now, to show that the exceptions part comes from your current amendments, whereas 90531 height is from the model code with your additional amendment from class 3 to class 1.
Correct.
So there's sort of two amendments here, amending the base section, the 90531, amending that in the model code, and then striking your exceptions in your current adopted code.
Moving them, not just striking them, but moving most of them down below dry
Correct,
standpipes.
correct.
Yes.
Right.
Removing them
That's
as
correct.
exceptions, yes.
Correct.
It'll be, yeah, this will all be struck through because you're moving them. But this is the only thing that changed in the model code, and then you guys had already amended those those exceptions. Now you're going to take them and move them.
So when we finalize, if this were to be approved as written, when we finalize it, it will stay height is replaced as follows and the exceptions deleted, to make sure it's clear to the reader that the exceptions have also been deleted from 905.3.1 from the model code. I understand they're moved, but the reader will see them deleted from that section.
That was the
Yeah,
intent.
yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Sir. Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Anybody else wishing to speak on this item? Or perhaps provide a motion?
Tony here with Denver Fire, motioning to approve as submitted.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Michael, I have a motion and a second for as submitted of item number 12, dealing with these standpipes. Is there any discussion? No? All right. Call the motion. The motion is as submitted. All those in favor? Call the question, I guess. All right. That motion passes 13-0 for as submitted. Thank you, everybody. And that will bring us to item number 15. Item number 15, dealing with section 907-213, egress elimination. This guy, John.
I got to sign chapter 9, so I apologize, everybody.
Okay.
This is John Wojcicki speaking for Denver Fire. We're making a modification to section 907-213, elimination of means of egress, basically to clarify the interconnection with the fire alarm panel. We're saying where the means of egress illumination is reduced at walking surface in auditoriums, theaters, concerts, or opera halls and similar occupancies, in accordance with section 108.2.1 of the International Building Code, the required illumination shall be automatically restored upon activation of the premises fire alarm system. That basically is intended to clarify what is meant by interface by the fire alarm control unit. Basically, the language of indicating the reduction at walking surfaces comes from 108.2.1, and this basically just tells us if the fire alarm is activated, then those lights are to be restored. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this item? Anyone from the public? No. Committee, questions, concerns, comments, motions?
Like the language, it does clean it up. It's fairly standard protocol, so I make a motion to accept as written.
Thank you, George. Is it a motion for approval as submitted? Is there a second?
Tony seconds.
Tony? All right, any discussion? No? Wow. All right. I'll call the question. The motion on the floor for item number 15 is as submitted. All those in favor of as submitted, please raise your hand. And that is a big 13-0. Thank you very much. 13-0. All right, the next item on the floor is number 65. 65, which is section 907-213, elevator status control panel. Oh, somebody different. Is this real Mike Stewart or Russell Holt? I don't know.
This is Russell Holt.
Okay, are you presenting this one, Russell? It says
No.
Mike Stewart, so that's, I just want to.
Mike should be on here on this one.
Okay. Mike, maybe I need to allow him to talk. I think he's called Russell
I'm here,
Holt on
Shauna.
there too. There you go. All right. You're just called Russell Holt because we changed both of Mike Stewart's. You were on there twice. Once is Russell and once is son.
Really
Anyway,
odd.
Mike Stewart, go ahead.
Okay, so on this proposal, there's a requirement in A17-1 that on the status panel, it shows whether the hoistway doors are open or closed. And then I also added putting on the panel that there should be an indicator on the panel that shows if any elevator or if a specific elevator, if the flashing hat is flashing inside the elevator cab. That would be helpful for the incident commander, that if he has a flashing hat for a particular elevator on his panel, he can relay that information to the fire crews faster for them to stay out of that elevator and go into a different elevator.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to that? Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this committee? Anybody wishing to speak?
I'll speak to it. There's Russell Holt.
Okay. I
think these are good ads, Mike. I think we ought to add one more of a visual to that panel, and that would be an ATS emergency power transfer light. Is it too late to add that to this proposal?
Well, it's never too late. Well, I mean, not today, it's not. So you want to add a number 12?
Yeah, number 12, what it'd be is an ATS transfer light for emergency power. Letting it's so the fire panel would indicate when the emergency ATS switch is transferred from power outage to emergency power. And in fact, you can put just add instead of and put add ATS transfer light for emergency power. That's perfect. That will eliminate a lot of confusion going on right now.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't use ATS. We should probably spell that out unless it's spelled out in the code.
Okay, then I'd say automatic transfer switch.
Yeah, although, hey, Russell, this is Tony from Denver Fire. We are already receiving that signal on the generator status panel.
Yeah, the problem is when the fire inspectors go out there, they're looking to see the FCC panel on the elevator to indicate when that transfer happens in 10 seconds. And that's not going to happen with the way the processes work through the elevator system. So what I'd like to do is, just like the drill we have in the lobbies, I'd like to add it to this panel so the incident commander and the fire inspectors can see right when that automatic transfer switch switches from building power to emergency power. That light should light up within 10 seconds without having to go through the process within the elevator system.
Yeah, so right now we already have a generator status panel installed adjacent to the fire alarm control panel. And it's got a denomination indicating when the transfer switch does its transfer. So I think we're already getting the signal.
But what this is for is they want to know when the elevator system is made sure that has a positive transfer to the elevator system. And that's what this light would do, Tony.
Right, so Tony, right now we've got a job right now where the fire inspectors, the life safety team, can't tell that the elevators are transferring over to the emergency power. That's what's bringing this up today.
Right. So how, I'm wondering how you would accomplish that, because what happens now, as soon as the building's transfer switch gear flips over and makes contact and starts feeding all the sub distribution panels, that's a single signal we're getting. As soon as that flops over, that means all the distribution panels have been powered up. So I don't know why the elevators would be any different, because they're taking power from the same distribution system that's already being monitored.
It's more of a way just for the fire inspectors and the incident commander to know for a positive that the elevators are energized, and how that signal will work is we are to get two signals to the elevator system for normal power and emergency power. And then with those two signals that hit the elevator system, and we have it automatically fire the emergency power light in the lobby of the elevators. And what we'll do is we'll just parallel that same signal over to the signal on the ATS on these high-rise buildings. And that way there'll be no more confusion with the elevator companies, because there's always that line drawn in the sand of, well, it's not really an elevator code, it's in the NEC. And then there's always the conversation, right, Mike, that, well, elevator companies have to follow the NEC. So this just clears up all that confusion. And that way, when the fire alarm inspection people come in from Denver Fire, all they have to do is look at the ATS transfer switch on the Fire Command Center panel, and that'll eliminate this confusion.
All right, thank you. Greg, did you have some comments?
Yeah, real quick. This is for all new equipment, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I still kind of agree with Tony on the ATS side. I mean, we're going to have so many different lights going on that it just seems a bit of an overkill on
Well, I mean,
on number 12.
if we want to educate the fire inspectors to make sure that they look at that ATS transfer light instead of trying to look at that FCC panel of the elevators, that's fine as well. But this has been a real problem for the last 3 or 4 years on every high rise that we do with emergency power, because you can't get the emergency generator up to speed, the ATS to transfer, and then the elevator processors to boot in time to get the PIs and emergency power lights on that FCC panel to come on within 10 seconds. And it turns into a real problem holding up buildings on turnover.
Okay.
I guess I'm Greg that, you know,
Yeah.
in modernization, you should really be pushing for.
Yeah, I get it now. I understand what you're saying now. When you roll through it.
Just a comment as far as language, I wouldn't use the word add, because it sounds like a modification to an existing. This is simply a list of what has to be provided. I would say include, but just a little side note to keep it clear.
That works.
Right. This is all still discussion because we don't have a motion on the floor.
Hey, question number 2, Russ. What is that gonna do to the size of those panels for the you know, the information that's in the FCC? I don't want to get us to a point where it's gonna make it so large that, you know, we're already limited in space. And none of this is going to take up more space, right? The panel can pretty much stay the same size.
Yeah, all we're gonna be doing is adding a jewel and some inscription on it. That'll be it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's really no function other than a light that's gonna come on when that transfer switch hits that elevator.
With some verbiage.
Huh?
With some verbiage.
Right. So Greg, also, I think there's times on those panels where it could just be an LED light. But then also with those lights, is just like you said, the verbiage on there that talks about, you know, if lights flashing, you know, it's the flashing fire hat. I don't think it actually has to be the symbol of the hat like you have in the car. It could just be an LED with language there saying that's the flashing hat in the car. And that could help reduce, you know, putting more items on those panels as well. It would be the same with the doors being in the fully open position.
So it would just, so the verbiage would be fully open and then either lit or unlit?
Correct. So yeah, when lit, doors are fully open.
Got it.
And again, you know, on the flashing fire hat, the verbiage can be, you know, when flashing, elevator cab, flashing hat, you know, operative or whatever. The wording could be
Right.
just to tell the firefighter that the flashing hat inside the cab is going on.
Does the ASME give any type of direction on what that language should be or that verbiage should be?
For the door open, let me pull up the code here.
I just don't want to get us in a spot where Otis puts on one thing and Schindler puts something else.
Agreed.
And
I understand that. Let's see.
I bet you do.
So it just says adjacent to the selector switches to indicate that the elevator is at the designated level with the doors in the normally open position. So it doesn't really give you language. It just needs to indicate that the elevator is at the designated level with the doors in the normally open position.
Do you want to add anything to provide clarity? Or are you good with it?
I mean, I'm not too concerned on the language as long as it's understood that, when lit, doors are fully open. And then they know it's at the designated landing because they still have the indicator on there showing you what level that the car is at.
Right. Okay.
All right. I still don't have a motion, but if you would like to make one for as submitted or as modified, or for disapproval, not tabled, that's not on the floor.
I'll make a motion for to accept as modified.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Who was that? George? Okay. So I have a motion for as modified by what you see on the screen. Any discussion?
I think Tony from Denver Fire here, I think if we're gonna include item 12, we need to correct the language.
Okay,
And maybe say visual signal illuminated when elevator equipment obtains emergency power.
all right,
Because Russ, if I'm correct, the elevator equipment itself does not have a transfer switch. It's relying on the building's main transfer switch gear, correct?
And you're right, Tony, but this light actually is for just to indicate that the transfer switch is turned over and it's giving power to the elevators. It really doesn't have anything. That signal's coming from the transfer switch to the elevator, and we're just gonna take that same signal that we get from the transfer switch and illuminate the light, just like we do in the lobbies. And the lobbies just say emergency power.
But does so the elevator gear has its own dedicated transfer switch?
No, the transfer switch gives us a signal. They give us two dry contacts as soon as that ATS transfers over to the elevator. So the elevator knows whether it's on emergency power or normal power. And what is required by code is we got to have an emergency power light in the lobby right now. But what's been going on is they don't want to leave the fire command center to make sure that transfer happened. They want to be able to see it right in the FCC right there on the emergency panel where all the elevator stuff is already. We're going to leave the signal out in the lobby because that has to be there because there's a lot of elevators that have emergency power with no FCC. All this is going to do is help the incident commander know that when that transfer is made onto the elevator.
it sounds like Tony is asking though, is it the switch that you truly need to provide or a signal to something? I'm like, is this
The automatic
correct
transfer switch is going to make the light illuminate. That's what essentially is going to make that turn on, Tony. Because I don't want them to mistake any of the other lights on that panel as an emergency, that they should be lit up in that 10 seconds. The only light that'll be judged on that 10 seconds is going to be this ATS transfer. Because that's where the confusion is the elevator is going to take anywhere between 15 to 30 seconds to fire up its processor, and where this one will automatically illuminate as soon as the ATS transfer is made.
All right. I'm just concerned, Russell, that we're creating more work for our inspectors because our life safety group, when they do an acceptance test of an emergency generator, already verifies and validates this signal at the generator status control panel, which is located in the fire command center.
Right. Hey, but Tony, but part of the problem is, again, we have a job right now where it is confusing to the fire inspectors because they're not seeing power being provided to that panel within the 10 seconds. So therefore they, so far failed the elevators because they like, wait a second, it's taking, 15 to 20 seconds for power to be on the panel. So therefore it's not coming in with the 10 seconds as prescribed by code. So as Russ is trying to say, either we need to do a better job of training the inspectors where to look for that specifically for the elevators, or this will actually help them to see that the power is beginning to come on for the emergency power for the elevators just by looking at the elevator status panel. Because that's what they're looking at now, and if they don't see it, and they're confused.
Yeah, but it sounds like, Mike, the issue is that system is not performing to its requirements, not the fact that a signal is not being delivered. The
let me-
signal
let me-
should be
let-
coming to the generator status panel already within the 10 seconds.
George?
Let me state this another way, guys, just because I think we're going in a circle. Effectively, what I'm hearing is the generator is required to activate its emergency voltage to the entire building within 10 seconds. We all know that. There's various ways of measuring that. We see the lights come on, whatever the mechanism is. However, even when within 10 seconds that voltage is applied to the elevator doesn't just blink on. The elevator system has a startup process. That startup process takes anywhere from 15 to 30, 45 seconds, whatever it is. And so there's a disconnect between, hey, we know the generator is running, but we don't know that the generator power is actually connected to the elevators at that 10-second point. We'll know that at that 30-second point or whatever the second point is when the lights turn back on the remote annunciator for the elevator. And so it is a training issue, or it's just a matter of, oh, what you're doing is we're going to light up a little light. That light doesn't have anything associated with the elevator equipment. That light essentially is just a double indication coming off the ATS switch that we did apply power to the building. And all we're doing is basically telling the inspector, see, I have power to the elevator equipment because this light came on, but in reality, the light or the energy for the elevator is not going to light any of the other lights for some other period of time. So Tony, this is a Band-Aid because the inspectors are saying, prove to me that power was applied to the elevator equipment at 10 seconds when I don't see the elevator equipment light up for 30 seconds.
That's essentially the case, yes.
Yeah, that is exactly what's going on.
Okay, we're gonna stop the conversation, or at least slow it down, and let Tony answer. Let's see if he understands it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand, George, but my concern is where does it stop? Because
I
we have
agree.
the same requirements for smoke control equipment.
I agree.
So do we start putting a light on the smoke control panel
Yeah,
now?
right.
I mean, that's why I think, right now we have one signal. It's on the generator status panel. And that control, I guess that's the validation for all equipment that's being run by that generator. So if we start fracturing it out into different system components, where does it end?
So, Tony, I agree
Stephen,
with you, but let me
Mike,
ask
Mike, I'm gonna hold you real quick. Stephen had his hand up next, and I want to go to Stephen.
I'd like to call the question. I think we've discussed it enough, and from my perspective, have an understanding of where we need to go. So I'd call the question.
Excellent. We're going to call the question. The motion on the floor is for as modified, as you see here. All those in favor of as modified, please raise your hand. All right, that is 4. All of those opposed, please raise your hand. That appears to be 8. And all of those abstaining. I think 1, because you had your hand up twice. Okay.
I lowered my hand, but it didn't
Yes.
lower.
That's okay. There's a little bit of delay I'm discovering here, so I got it. So that motion fails with a vote of 4 to 8 to 1. So we go back to, so as modified did not pass. We still can go back to either disapproval or to as submitted or to modify it in a different way.
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. So motion for as submitted. Do we need further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of as submitted, please raise your hand. I see a vote of 12. I'm going to lower those hands. And all those opposed to as submitted? Pretty sure
I'm in
Stephen-
favor. It
I
just didn't
know.
lower.
It is. I'm getting that. All right. So 12 to 1 with 1 opposition. So
And then I'd like to interrupt in this. I think this the whole point of this committee is to improve the process. In this case, I think both Tony and Mike need to be aware that there needs to be some training for Derek's group so that this isn't an issue. We don't create a solution when it can be trained over.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, George.
I just wanted to also add just a reminder to the committee. One of the critical parts of all these proposals was to justify how it is significant to Denver. And that's something that we tried to assist with the original proposals. Of course, not all proposals could be argued so well, but just remember when you guys are modifying these in the committee here and you're adding something kind of new to it, I would encourage you to make a statement as to why that is significant to Denver, because that was something that we were very clearly told to review and scrutinize with what you're initially being presented with. So just try to add that into your statements if you're significantly changing something. Thank you.
Thank you. That is true. We got that direction in the beginning. All right, I'm going to call to the floor item number 60. Looks like section 90339, dealing with elevator sprinkler and detection. Mr. Wojcicki.
I hope you enjoyed your few minutes without me. John Wojcicki, once again, representing Denver. Essentially, this is a combination of items to try to remove references to smoke detection and heat detection from the sprinkler section, and to clarify what is required for sprinklers, for smoke detection, and so forth in the appropriate sections. I'm going to run through this very quickly. Please let me know if I'm going too fast. In the very beginning, all we've done is move the struck section or the struck sentence up to the beginning because the focus of 90339 is where sprinklers shall be provided. And we're saying that they're going to be provided only as required by this section and NFPA 13's 936 in buildings protected with automatic sprinkler systems. That's been provided in accordance with NFPA 13 or 13R. We strike out the section saying where sprinkler protection is provided, installation shall comply with NFPA 13, since we've already said that. And at the very bottom, where sprinkler protection is not provided, automatic fire detector shall be provided in accordance with NFPA or with section 90733. That belongs in section 90733. No one who's installing sprinklers cares about the automatic fire detection, so that's why that's removed. The next section, we have red text just changing from changes that have been made in the 2021 edition, going from section 607 to 604. And here we're going to give a cross reference to 90733 just to indicate that there may be some other information provided there. Again, we're going to add that sprinklers shall be installed in accordance with NFPA 13936 and strike out the next two sections, because this is for elevators undergoing alteration, and these two sections we're simply moving to the existing section on elevators undergoing alterations. So that's and this is all the stuff here in 9033911 and 12 is detection related. So we've moved it to 907. So moving on down to 90733, we've added this section to say that the elevator emergency operation shall be in accordance with this section and ASME A17.1 and NFPA 72. Previous editions of Denver amendments had referenced 190 degrees heat detection in certain sections and 200-degree heat detection in other sections. To make sure that we're not being too restrictive, we've changed this to say it's fixed temperature 190 to 200-degree F heat detection. In other words, anything in that range from 190 to 200 is acceptable because it has been acceptable in the past. And smoke detectors shall be provided for shunt trip and recall operation respectively, where those functions are required. So those functions are required by ASME A17.1, for example. Again, we've kind of consistently used the fixed temperature and then the temperature heat detection. So that's what it says here. Fixed temperature 135-degree F heat detection shall be installed at the top of elevator hoistways for recall operation where shunt trip is not required and where elevator machinery is installed in a non-sprinklered hoistway. And that's basically just a rewrite of the text struck out below it. Moved the 135F to the consistent location after fixed temperature. And then we struck out in buildings with a fire alarm system to say detectors shall be connected to a building fire alarm system where provided. In other words, where the building fire alarm system is provided. The exceptions, there's a whole bunch of discussion in exception 1 that talked about the kinds of conditions, but condition 1 is all about providing an administrative modification. Therefore, they shall identify the alternative means and methods that will be provided in their AM. That's all this, just struck out all that other language. The next one stays the same except for a change from per to in accordance to. And then one of the issues that we've run into is that linear heat detectors installed with 135 Fahrenheit temperature are only allowed to be installed in 100-degree areas. And spot type heat detectors that are rated to 135 can be installed up to 115. And in discussions with Mike Stewart, the lack of conditioning in some of these spaces lent us to suggest that the 155 Fahrenheit detectors was appropriate for recall operation because they can be installed in areas up to 115 Fahrenheit as well. So that's the allowance of using 155 F in lieu of 135 F when you use linear heat detection for recall. For shunt trip, where we're providing sprinklers in elevator shafts, machine rooms, spaces, or control rooms or spaces, the elevator shunt trip shall be activated prior to sprinkler operation. Shunt trip is not required for sprinklers installed within 2 feet of the floor of the elevator pit. This stems from ASME requirements, and it's essentially saying that we have no equipment in the at the bottom of the pit that is not waterproof already. The ASME requires that anything within 4 feet of the floor be waterproof. And so the requirement to make sure that we don't spray water on that stuff goes away if we've got those sprinklers installed within 2 feet of the floor of the elevator pit. And that helps us because NFPA 72 has, in the latest edition, the 2019 edition, added a requirement to say that you cannot have detection in the hoistway unless it can be maintained and tested from outside of the hoistway. So this has caused some issues. So we're trying to eliminate the requirement for the detection for shunt trip for elevators with the sprinklers installed within 2 feet. We pop on down to the alterations to existing elevators. And in essence, what we've done is just copied those sections from 903 directly down here to 907 with one exception, a couple of exceptions, I'm sorry. One exception is one of those 4 items talked about in cars not equipped with an elevator visual signal, signage shall be provided. So instead of repeating that twice in 907, 33, 521, and 521, I guess 522, sorry. We've now put it in the base text of 907 3352. And then that section of protection of elevator lobbies, hoistways, and so forth, provided in accordance with this. Again, it's just a copy paste from the 903 section above. And so then we have our hydraulic and traction elevator sections. And the one change that I was talking about is, again, we've allowed 190 to 200 F detection installed within 2 feet and at the same elevation of each sprinkler. Okay, so and the last piece, there's also an exception under the traction elevators where linear heat detection is installed. We've repeated that 155 F allowance for linear heat detections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. All right. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this rather large proposal, but good summary by John. Anybody from the public? Committee.
Shauna, if I may, real quick, I just want to clarify to the committee, the changes that you see in red font, those were changes made to the baseline code and are not, those are already done as part of the baseline amendments we did last year. And so those are not actually parts of this proposal.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, committee. There's a lot there. Hopefully you've done your homework.
There's a lot there, and John, I commend you in rewriting this and getting into separate sections. It's actually really good. The 2 numbers that you were dealing with as you spread from 190 to 200, did you verify that it didn't need to be 205? I know there's a lot of pancake heats, dumb heats that are used in these applications connected to intelligent modules. And I'm not sure that they stop at 200. There may be, you know, what was your evaluation based upon what was readily available? Was it-
So there were two things. The first is, as I said, originally we had in the two different sections, 903 and 907, reference to either 190 degree or 200 degree. We did not actually allow a range of any type. And I did go out into the market and look and find that there were a number of different devices available in that range of 190 to 200, 190, 195. I believe I found some 200s. I did not continue to look and see what other devices might be appropriate. I found that there was, it was not a single manufacturer. And so we weren't limiting, or I did not feel like we were over constraining. And in fact, we have expanded from previous years by allowing a range as opposed to specifying a specific temperature.
Well, that works in actuality, John, is everybody ignored it. If it was close to, it was close to 200. But that is kind of where we got with that. And then the 155, quite honestly, that was more designed about what linear heat detections could actually be applied in that environment. And so we've been doing that for about a year and a half, Tony. It's been a while.
That's correct.
Doing that. So.
And I should note that and it's not in here, but you cannot have two heat detectors if you require both recall and shunt. You must have smoke detectors. So that provision of saying that if the environmental conditions don't permit, does not apply in the case where you have to have both.
And that's excellent because that has come up before. I know there's been other alternatives proposed using two different values of heat detectors, and I know that that's not something that we've looked at being approved. If once you got to the point where you've got 200-degree heat detectors, you're going to have incipient detection or some sort of smoke detection for the lower level. So that's actually good. And you're right, guys. This one took homework. This is, you can't go through all of this in the time period, but
Tony? Oh, sorry, George.
That's all right. I was just going to say, it looks like everything's there.
Excellent. Tony?
And John, I think it'd be important to clarify to the committee that we've removed, I mean, at Denver, we used to have our own standalone method for how we dealt with elevator functions. With what John's done here, we've more closely matched NFPA 72 and the national standards, so that we don't necessarily have a Denver specific method anymore. Correct, John?
That's correct, and yet there are still some nuances here that are Denver specific, so it's not entirely base code.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, I will say this section's pretty crazy, and thanks for putting this together, Sean. It's definitely impressive. In section 903, there are two references to a specific section of NFPA 13. I would suggest for future ease, since NFPA has been reorganizing, it'd be easier just to reference NFPA 13 and get rid of the reference to the section 936.
I think that's reasonable.
There's one of them, Shauna, and there's one a little bit below that.
It's just on the just on the bottom of the or top of the next page.
Oh.
Yep, that's all I have.
There's one other element. After this was submitted, there was a document circulated by Colorado. Tony, you'll have to say who in Colorado had circulated that. And the only question is whether the 286-degree sprinkler is still applicable. NFPA 13 calls for ordinary or intermediate temperature sprinklers, and we have to justify if we go anything other than that according to the Colorado document.
John, are you referring to Rob's document for the state?
It was a flow chart. Tony, do you recall who had circulated that?
Yeah, that's distributed by state conveyance, but
yeah,
we supersede it with home rule, John.
Okay, sorry, my apologies.
Hey, Robert, did you have more? Or
nope, that was all I had.
All right. Do I hear a motion for as modified?
All motion to approve as modified.
Okay, Robert, do I hear a second?
I'll second. Tony?
Okay. I have a motion on the floor for item number 60 for as modified, which the modified version is a little confusing, but is truly just taking out section 9.3.6 in 2 locations out of section 90339 and 903.391. Tony.
Donna, can I ask one question?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm, and like I said, I'm not a fire alarm guy, I'm an elevator guy, or a fire alarm expert, I'm an elevator guy. Well, what's the difference between a smart heat and a linear heat?
The linear heat allows us to do all of the testing from outside of the hoistway because both ends of the wire come outside and all testing can be conducted outside.
Okay, thank you.
And Russell, linear heat's a piece of wire, and the spot detector is the one you hold in your hand.
And I kind of knew that, I knew they were wired, but that answers me that both wires are coming outside of which I got it.
Awesome. Any other discussion? All right, the motion on the floor is for as modified. All those in favor of as modified for item number 60, please raise your hand. Well, and that was a flat 13-0. Good job, John. That was a lot of work.
Donna, thank you
Appreciate that.
thank you for making sure that it was delayed so that we only had 15 minutes to discuss this.
If I may, guys, if I could request the committee to hang on maybe another 3 minutes. The next proposal is a public proposal that addresses this exact same section 907.332. And you guys basically covered it in this proposal, but yet there was one little language change in the next one that I think may still be worth looking at. And the reason I ask you to do that today is because it's literally, you guys just had the whole same conversation that you would have here. And it's about the shunt trip not applying to the bottom portion of the elevator in that bottom 24 inches where you've got 48 inches of wet use protection. So I was requested by the public to be the presenter for this one. The gentleman that proposes couldn't be here today. There's no need for the top of the elevator change based on the additional sentence you guys added in the just now in the previous proposal. But I do think that there's some value in the way the wording to machinery spaces, because it does read a little odd in what you just approved. It says elevator shafts, machine rooms, spaces, or control rooms or spaces. And so I think you may want to just consider that. I was going to bring it up as a modification to your last proposal, but I figured you'd let this gentleman's proposal be seen.
So you're proposing to take this out because it's not needed anymore.
Because you've covered it now in the previous approval, but I
And
would
so
suggest
really
that
this is the
maybe
only thing that changed.
Yeah, that may be a good worthwhile clarification. And so thanks for your added few minutes. If you could, we can knock this one out.
All right, anybody from the public wishing to speak to this one?
And obviously I'm
Committee?
not giving testimony because it's the same testimony you guys just got. It's the same
Gotcha.
impact.
All right. Oops, I gotta lower all these hands because right now all of you want to talk. All right, anybody wishing to speak to this one? Committee, Tony? No? So really the change would be, it would be if you were to go for it, we would modify it to remove that underline, not underline it, and just have the machinery room, the machinery spaces, machine rooms, machinery spaces, or control room. Any discussion? And Glenn, your discussion on machinery spaces versus just spaces.
All right, well, it's a terminology used elsewhere in the code where it clarifies machine rooms and exactly machinery spaces. And
Okay.
as is, it's just in a list of commas and it's an independent term. So it doesn't actually clarify what spaces it's even talking about. If you notice at the end of that list, you get control rooms or spaces. referencing both rooms and spaces to control. But in the first part, spaces doesn't reference back to what type of space it is. So simply clarifying machinery space, and that's terminology used elsewhere in the code.
Thank you, Brad.
So are you suggesting the deletion of machine rooms?
Nope, it's simply adding the word machinery in front of spaces.
So
So I-
it'll say elevator shafts, machine rooms, machinery spaces, or control rooms or spaces. You have control rooms or spaces, and it'd basically be machine rooms or spaces.
Okay, so you're gonna keep spaces in there twice. Okay, all right, never mind.
Yeah. Again, spaces was just an independent term between two commas with no clarity as to what the space actually is. And so this proponent is just simply making that clear. It's elevator shafts, machine rooms, machinery spaces, and then control rooms or spaces.
Got it.
Both.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Very simple, and it just would tack on to the modifications from the previous proposal.
John?
Just really quickly, you could also simply put an or in there and say
Mhm.
elevator, machinery rooms or spaces, or control rooms or spaces. That's all.
Right, I thought about that
Yeah.
too.
I think the proponent did this because, again, machinery spaces is something that comes up when this kind of list is made elsewhere. But either or, I just want to make sure we finish off this section with all the changes.
All right,
I'm just gonna add that I like the concept of using the machinery spaces versus an or, just because it just throws us into thinking about the MRL and all of that invokes. Machine rooms invokes the traction and hydraulics, but machinery spaces kind of invokes the MRLs.
excellent, thank you. All right, well, can I have a motion? I think, John, your hand is just still up. Okay. Brad, did you have further discussion? All right, I need a motion. You know, I don't have any plans for this evening, so we can.
This is Tony. I'll motion to approve as modified.
Okay,
Second,
and that was Greg?
Yep.
All right, thank you. And, all right, I have a motion for approval as modified to just, the only modification was to take out the underlining of in the top. Or actually, we didn't take those words out.
No, those would remain unchanged in this because the previous proposal addressed the same thing in a different way,
Okay.
and that's already been approved.
Well, they were
and so it
underlined. They
didn't
were
seem
underlined,
necessary.
which meant that was new.
Yeah, so they'd come out.
So just to clarify, does this add the word machinery to the somewhere in the amendment we just approved, or would this be adding machinery to a different section altogether?
It would
This
add it
is
to
the
907-332.
This is the section you just approved. It was one section that was part of that larger proposal.
Okay,
So this
so
would
just adding
simply add
the
into
word
that.
machinery to that section.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yep. All right, motion on floors for as modified, as you see here on the screen. All of those in favor, please raise your hand. To basically adding the word machinery. 12. All right, and I don't know, we might only have 12. All those opposed?
I'm not opposed, I'm for it.
Okay, all right, so it's a 13-0. All right, so that motion passes 13-0. Thank you. We got through 12 proposals. Well, we tabled 2, so we got through 10. Good job, because some of those were pretty in-depth. I really appreciate you. So we will start next hearing probably with item number 55. On that, hopefully, is our last hearing. Oh, no, we'll start with the 2 that we tabled. Right? We tabled number 46 again, and then we tabled something else. Didn't we? Table 2 of them?
Master PRVs. All.
Yeah, number 42.
Yeah, I'll be trying to clean those up so we
Yeah,
can make them fast.
46 and 42. I will send you guys the one that we had kind of started on 46, the language that we started with, so you can pick up from there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.